There are 7,000 peptides in your body. They're just simple amino acid chains. So if you look at letters in the alphabet, you know that we've got 26 letters in the alphabet, and you rearrange those letters and they make words. This is exactly the same with amino acids. So there are 20 amino acids, and they can be moved in 7,000 different ways to make different sequences of peptides or proteins. So simply 0 to 50 amino acids in some form of sequence equals a peptide. Now, these being in your body naturally produced, it's basically signaling your body to upregulate a certain system. So think about a key for a specific lock. So they're very, very individualized.
Hello and welcome to the Biohackher Podcast. I'm Azra, your host and founder of Biohackher. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach specializing in longevity for women, a health and wellness journalist, writer, corporate consultant, and a biohacking advocate. Biohackher is a space where we can explore ways to optimize our health to live well longer. Whether it's through improving our nutrition, exercising, cryotherapy, supplementation, technology, and more, I'll be bringing you information and interviews with the best longevity experts to help you understand what you can do to optimize your health, prevent disease, and slow down or even reverse the symptoms of aging by taking control of your unique bio-individuality. Want to know more? Let's dive in. Ted McGill, welcome to the Biohacker Podcast. Great to have you on. I want to get cracking straight into it because peptides is such a hot topic right now. I think everybody's talking about it. And there seems to be quite a lot of misinformation out there as well. So for someone that's hearing the word peptides for the first time and doesn't know what peptides are, give us a bit of a 101 on what peptides are and how they're different from other supplements.
Absolutely. I'll give you a tiny bit of background really quickly, just why I can actually talk about peptides, because peptides in the Australian space are so regulated. Anyone that owns a clinic, a pharmacy, is an expert doctor, they actually can't talk about it publicly because it's seen as advertising and they can get big fines from the TGA. Now, I'm lucky in the fact that I did found Biohacked, which is one of Australia's largest medical clinics in the peptide space over 7 years ago. But I since sold the company last year and I have no affiliation with the company anymore. So I can give you, I guess, a very good insight into peptides, the peptide market, because I'm not going to be stung by the TGA for talking about it. So I will get stuck right in. Peptides, look, there's so much information out there at the moment, and that's what's because it is such a hot topic, that everyone's being led in different ways, generally by, an influencer with a ring light. And it's very hard to maintain the education. And I think understanding what a peptide is at its base level will really help you understand what it's actually doing to the body and therefore give you a better understanding. So there are 7,000 peptides in your body. They're just simple amino acid chains. So if you look at letters in the alphabet, you know that we've got 26 letters in the alphabet, and you rearrange those letters and they make words. This is exactly the same with amino acids. So there are 20 amino acids, and they can be moved in 7,000 different ways to make different sequences of peptides or proteins. So simply 0 to 50 amino acids in some form of sequence equals a peptide. Now, these being in your body naturally produced, it's basically signaling your body to upregulate a certain system. So think about a key for a specific lock. So they're very, very individualized. That's why the 7,000, they're all different words and they make up a language, which is, peptides themselves. So they're all very target specific. They're already being made in your body, and generally they're just helping your body turn up a switch which might have been turned down, whether that be through age, injury, whatever it may be. And we can get into all the specifics of injury, of all the peptides later. But really simply, it's just almost like the difference between a supplement, which is a raw ingredient, and then you've got a peptide, which is these manufactured products, and then a pharmaceutical. They're designed to block something or force something in your biology. So a pharmaceutical product is a non-native medication that enters your body and it either stops a process or forces a process. Whereas a peptide is simply a naturally occurring substance that we're introducing to help upregulate or downregulate an existing process in your body.
Yeah, cool. So with peptides, my understanding is that we need to have certain pathways for certain peptides to work. Is that correct? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So look, every peptide that you've ever heard of is following a pathway. As I said, there's 7,000 peptides in the body, which means there's 7,000 different pathways.
Yeah.
And every single different type of peptide is essentially targeting a different pathway. Now, they can be right for a peptide or they can be wrong for a peptide. So a peptide can suit anyone, but it also, you need to be exactly primed for it to actually do the job that it's designed to do. So I like to think of a peptide like a turbo on an engine. But if you haven't got your engine, there's no point putting a turbo on it, right? So you need your engine to be in good form to then to put a turbo on it and then it to obviously increase the capacity of the engine.
What do you mean by the body needs to be primed for the peptide to work?
Everything comes down to sleep, nutrition, exercise. Okay, so if you're not giving your body the right nutrition, you can't bake a cake with a pantry that's empty. You need the right ingredients, right? And it's the same with if you're fueling your body full of peptides, but it doesn't have the right ingredients inside to actually utilize that peptide, it's not going to work. And that's why there's so many variable differences. And if you look at growth hormone peptides, for instance, the biggest thing that you need to do to repair your body and injury repair peptides is sleep. So if you're introducing a peptide, but you're not sleeping, then there's going to be no effect of the peptide because your body's not in a state to actually heal or do the things that the peptide is telling it to do. And it's the same with inflammation. So for instance, if you look at studies from the gut and the microbiome in the gut has to be primed for a lot of peptides to work. BPC157, the body protection compound, actually originates in the gut. And that's why it's actually even more beneficial for women, not only because of the gut sensitivity, but because it affects so many soft tissue circumstances. It actually really helps with things when it comes to like pelvic floor, when it comes to peri and post menopause and all these other things. But protocols are generally all by men, written for men. And so there needs to be more of a female influence because the difference between a 48-year-old man and a 48-year-old woman post-menopause is totally different hormonal outlook, and peptides are going to have completely different outcomes.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm really glad that you raised that because it's an important consideration for anybody who is thinking about taking peptides because we are so biologically different and women are cyclical beings and we have lots of hormone fluctuations throughout our lifespan, and it's something that we absolutely need to consider. Peptides are so hot at the moment, so in the longevity and performance, and I suppose, but they have been around for many, many years. I mean, like, you think the Russians have been playing around with peptides for, tens of years, if not more. Why do you think it's become such a hot thing to do now, and particularly around women's health as well? Why are women getting so interested in peptides now?
Yeah. I love to touch on what you just said, that peptides have been around for so long with the Russians, because there's so many cool stories behind it. Because I started this peptide company in 2020, 5/8. So that's a long time. And in this last 6-7 years, it's gone from being such a naughty word, along with the steroids and basically sports scandals and everything else. As you know, now every man and his dog is giving you advice. But it's the same with when cryptocurrency came about, when there were like influencers with their shirts off giving me financial advice, I wanted no interest because I'm like, how are you qualified? And now this is happening with peptides. But in Russia, they actually developed peptides for two different reasons. And number one is an anti-nuclear regime secretly. So soldiers who are exposed to nuclear radiation could heal and not feel the effects of radiation. So that's where all the thymogen peptides came in. And in the 80s, in the Cold War, they developed them for spies. So if you look at the cognitive peptides like CMAX and C-Lang, that was to be cool and calm under pressure for Air Force pilots and things like that, and spies in covert operations, and also to increase their memory, sharpness, and capacity. So it's quite cool that they've done studies, like so many studies, but they were never translated into the Western world. And everyone thinks that peptides are now part of this Silicon Valley movement, but they're old school Soviet Union. Like it's, they've been around for a while. It's just people are finally catching on.
Yeah, and it's often the case, isn't it, that these type of things evolve elsewhere. I think Australia can be a little bit behind the ball for a lot of things in the biohacking space, and we're starting to catch up because NMN is a classic example of the TGA recently approving that. And I've been on NMN for, over 6 years now, and throughout those 6 years, it was considered, you shouldn't be taking it, you shouldn't be buying it off the grey market or buying it online because it's not TGA approved. But now all of a sudden the TGA has approved it. So,
Yeah,
I
but
think it will
banned
evolve.
NAD. They banned NAD, which is basically you're taking NMN, the precursor, to
That's it.
obviously increase your NAD levels, and they banned NAD, which is the actual molecule itself. And
Yeah.
because it's so amazing. But NMN, given the right source, is amazing because it is a smaller molecule to enter the body, as you know, and you get the
Yeah.
results that you need to. But yeah, a lot of snake oil cells.
Definitely. They certainly are. And we'll get into that a little bit later as well, because I do want to do a bit of a deep dive into where people are sourcing their peptides from, because we want to make sure that anybody who is wanting to try peptides, that where they can source it from and that it's a safe source. But before we go there, do you think that peptides are as revolutionary as what people are claiming them to be? Or is it that, as you said, that you have to prime your body and you need to make sure that those pathways are available for the peptide to work? Have you seen really huge changes in people by taking a peptide, particularly when you hit by V8?
Yeah. So what I'm going to say first, and this is just, I have to say this, is I'm not a medical professional. I never have been. And so any advice that I'm given, it's from a personal experience. I'm lucky enough to have a unique experience because we helped over 150,000 members in Australia. So we've got a lot of, I had a lot of consumer data, but by no means am I recommending anything. It's just a personal experience. And I can absolutely attribute and tell you from the knowledge that I've gained in the last 10 years. So with peptides, I absolutely think they're revolutionary. I think they're amazing, but you do have to remember they are still at the frontier of medicine. And apart from the GLP-1s, most of the studies they've been referring to are animal studies. And there have been very few clinical studies that have proven, because to get a clinically approved medication, there is so much testing, right? And even with peptides being prescribed in Australia, they're still not TGA registered medicines. So when a doctor prescribes them to you, they're actually doing basically a contraindication telehealth, which basically means they're checking that there's nothing wrong with you that prevents them prescribing it and having a go. But there's no definitive, like, you're sick, take this antibiotic. There's no direct correlation to this is for you. It's still essentially testing it in your own body. It may work for you. It may not work for you. The experience that I've had when I had Biohackер is, I would say 90% of people had a positive response, but the people that didn't, it was either they weren't addressing the root cause properly and were still trying to mask a symptom, or their body wasn't primed to receive what they were trying to do. And lastly, people in this world where the attention span's gotten so small, everyone just wants a magic pill. And, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a magic pill. And we'll get into the GLP-1s later, but there's so many serious side effects, especially for women. When you're looking at, the GLP-1s, most peptides, as I said, they're biologically similar to the way that your body's pharmacy works. And think of it like a speaker on a stereo system. What you're trying to do is, if your signal's quietened down, the peptides help turn the volume up, right? But there's a ceiling. And so at max volume, you can't go any louder. The speaker's at capacity. But that's changed in the loop where the GLP-1s, they're basically not only taking away the ceiling, they're removing the switch. So they actually completely change the way that your body works biologically. So they're not saying, hey, turn this up or lower this a little bit. They're actually removing the body's whole sequence that says you're hungry, and you can put your body into starvation mode. So there's an extra layer of safety that needs to be assimilated with the GLP-1s, because they're not like other peptides, which have that safety ceiling. You can do some serious damage. And if you look at people who are even perimenopause in the lead up, because you can be in that lead up before your last period for years, right? So your hormones, once you hit that last period, it's the 30% drop in collagen, I believe. It's straight away. It's a free fall. Now,
40,
men don't have that, right? So the difference between taking Ozempic is, I don't know if you know, but fat in women actually converts to estrogen, which then converts to collagen. So if you're taking away all the fat from your body, you're literally taking away your body's ability to make collagen and your skin elasticity. And that's why you see so many people with this Ozempic face, because you're taking away the fat, which allows your body to reproduce and regulate your hormones. So it's a massive hormonal change that you're doing, and you're starving your body of the ability to produce collagen.
And it doesn't look great, right? I mean, that Ozempic face, like you look at some of these celebrities, like I look at them, I'm like, what are you thinking? How can you possibly think that is a great outcome? I mean, I suppose it's all about perception, but
we get blinded by fashion trends, right? Like, everyone wanted, for a while, everyone looked like the same person. Like I could go to my gym and unlock my phone with 30 different women because everyone had the same Botox, the same filler, and they all look the same. And now people are going back to natural, thank God. And I don't mean that as an insult to anyone that has whatever. You're allowed to do what you want, but I'm saying the influence of trends, people just jump on these bandwagons. And I think the latest one was Ozempic, but without people, they just haven't done the research. They're just jumping on from some influencer who gives them something to do. And even with the states, I mean, their regulations are completely different. They can advertise prescription medication. We can't. And that's why people in Australia are like, oh, this is big all of a sudden. It's actually not. It's just all the influences and stuff from other countries have started trickling along. And now the grey market has exploded so much because the actual regulated market is so restricted. It's hard to, if you can't talk about something, how can you market that it's available? But the black market have this free range to say whatever they want, and people take it as fact. So there's just a lot of things that need to be taken into account. And I've just started a company called SEVYN Club, so SEVYN.club. And its purpose is education only and coaching before you take the step of peptides. Because when I own my company, I just noticed that so many people weren't addressing the low-hanging fruit. They were going up here straight away. And they weren't ready for that. Their body wasn't ready for that. And it's like, whoa. Before you start taking medication, why don't we just start sleeping well and eating healthy and reducing the inflammation in your body? And why don't we get the basics right, and then everything else will follow? You probably won't need a peptide. The fact that you're riddled with inflammation, you're not sleeping, your cortisol spike because you're super stressed. Like, let's look at some lifestyle changes first. So
completely agree with you on that one. It's insane how many people think that just taking a tablet or taking a peptide is going to be the solution to all of their problems. And one of the things that I keep saying to my clients is that you need to implement those lifestyle choices and those changes. You need to have those foundations right, because even if you're taking a peptide or if you're trying to implement something else that you think is going to be your miracle cure, you are not setting yourself up for sustainable change at all. Because the minute you come off that peptide, the minute you come off that GLP-1, it's highly likely you're going to put on that weight like that so much
it's actually
more rapidly.
Even worse because you have a bounce back. So your hunger goes through the roof. So you'll end up hungrier than when you started. You're meant to use it as a Band-Aid, some people use antidepressants as a way to go through therapy and manage an issue and then get through it. The same with a GLP, it should be a Band-Aid solution while you fix the issue. And if your issue is overeating, there's a sugar addiction there or something that's going on that's causing you to be obese. And if you're addressing that, you've got the capability to address that issue while you're on a GLP. But you should by no means use it as the way to become skinny and stay on it, because it's going to do way more damage to your body in the long run. Just fix the cause, not treat the symptom. And I think biohacking, that's where it's going, right? It's people investing in their health and wellness and looking at prevention rather than reactive medicine. And I think the GLP-1s are very sitting on the fringe there because it is kind of reactive. It's not in that preventative measure. And I think that's where you have to be careful because, again, like you just said, the Band-Aid fix. It's been proven time and time over again that the biggest longevity thing that you can do in your body, it's resistance training, it's muscle. Muscle is the biggest longevity organ in the body. You put that with the right nutrition and sleep, 10 out of 10 times that's going to beat a peptide.
Yeah, agree. Absolutely. Let's do a bit of a deeper dive into how these peptides actually work. And I'm assuming that different peptides will work in different ways, and we can probably go through a bit of a list of them later. But at a higher level, you mentioned those pathways, but in terms of repairing or hormone modulation, can you sort of outline at a high level how they might work in those sort of areas? And then we can do a bit of a deeper dive into each one.
Yeah, absolutely. Injury repair, I guess that's the biggest one. Everyone's heard of BPC and thymosin beta-4 or TB500. So thymosin beta-4 is a 43 amino acid chain. It's a long sequence peptide, which works on a lot of pathways. And they've reduced TB500. It's either 9 or 11. So it's a fragment of that chain, which is target specific to injury repair. So think of thymosin beta-4, TB500, like if you're renovating a house, that's the delivery trucks bringing in all the raw materials. And the BPC, that's the form worker directing thumbs of where to go and what to do and how to do it. So BPC is very good at, inflammation and target specific with soft tissue damage and all of those type of things. Your thymosin peptides, they're just the big soldiers that go in and, mess a lot of things around, but they really help with inflammation. They get stuff done. They get stuff under control. So that as a combination, they work so well together. That's why they're often paired together. And that's I can't remember what's the saying that everyone uses, the Wolverine stack, I think is what Instagram calls it.
Yeah. There's a glow stack I've heard of, which is something different, but there's the Wolverine stack.
Yeah. And look, I'm always very skeptical personally as well about these combination peptides. Look, not from a medical doctor compounded practice, because there's so much regulation with sterility, endotoxin, mold, and all the things that take to compound these peptides. Now, peptides have different pH levels and things like that. So if you've mixed a bunch of peptides in a manufacturer out of China and then you're reconstituting it back home, the likelihood of these combo peptides, almost like chucking a bunch of Japanese fighting fish in a jar, they're going to fight and they're fragile chains. So there's a really higher risk of degradation. So personally, I would never get a multi-peptide, and they're becoming more and more multi in the single vial. I would always stick to a singular peptide, again, personal preference. And the reason how I got into this originally was because 10 years ago, probably 12 years ago now, I was experimenting with Chinese peptides and I got pulmonary hypertension and I got severe high blood pressure of the lungs. I could barely walk upstairs, and all the studies that I've done, as you could probably tell, I'm very ADHD, but the old school one, the one that used to jump off a roof at 4 years old, not the new diagnosis. But yeah, so I was like, this can't be the peptide. It has to be the source. And that's when I really got into, there's got to be a way to prescribe this and have it regulated by a practitioner who's checking your bloods and making sure that you're actually primed, and more importantly, you're getting what's advertised. So you've got, as I said, I went off track, I apologize, but we've got the injury repair peptides. And then the next biggest ones are the growth hormone releasing peptides. So you've got ipamorelin and CJC 1295, which is the most that are prescribed at women's clinics. And because ipamorelin itself, that's a GHRP. And that basically, ipamorelin, there's 5 different stages. You've got, there's semirelin, ipamorelin, GHRP2, GHRP6, and hexarelin. So they're all part of the same family. They're the GHRP, and then there's the GHRH, and that's like CJC 1295, tesamorelin, and they work together when you combine a GHRH and a GHRP. One helps your body produce growth hormone, and then the other side triggers the release at a certain time. So one's helping your body produce and one's triggering your body to release. Now, ipamorelin is probably the best one for women because it doesn't increase prolactin, it doesn't mess with your estrogen levels or cortisol levels. Some of the others can cause a spike. So that's probably why CJC and ipamorelin are the most commonly prescribed together. And tesamorelin on the other side has really started lately becoming popular in the market because it got FDA approved for AIDS patients because of the way that it really helps your body produce growth hormone, but it really obliterates visceral fats. Visceral.
Yeah.
So it helps your body really get that unhealthy, unstable fat, which is normally very hard to get, which obviously people love. So from a growth hormone perspective, that's the king combination.
So that GHRP, I think you said, and the other acronym, the other G one, are they growth secreting gogs? Is that what it's called?
It's a growth hormone releasing peptide and a growth hormone releasing hormone. And basically they stimulate your body's pituitary gland to produce and release more growth hormone. But as I mentioned before, they only tell your body, you can either yell at someone and they're not going to listen, or you can just give them a quiet reminder. And this is what these are doing. They're giving your body a quiet reminder to, hey, let's produce some growth hormone. Remember how we used to do this? Let's do it again. So it's basically telling your body to naturally produce. Unlike exogenous hormones, say if you were to go and take growth hormone, you're actually topping up an exogenous hormone on top of what your body can actually produce. And not only does that shut down your body's natural production, but you're putting your body into unknown territory with these levels that your body can't produce. So that's where all the side effects come in. So when you're introducing a peptide, it's your body's increasing its IGF levels only to the limit of its natural production. It's never going to go outside that. So you're never going to open yourself up to the side effects like you would with actual growth hormone. Now, there is a big link. There's been a lot of talk with people talking about does it include the risk of cancer, the big C. Now, the growth hormone, if you look at growth hormone and what it does, it helps your body reproduce new cells. If your body has bad cells and good cells, and cancer cells, it's going to make all the cells grow faster. So indeed, in theory, it could. If you had existing cancer cells, it could increase the growth. So that's why you always recommend pathology and get tested beforehand and make sure that your base level's fine. I don't recommend anyone peptides because I'm not a doctor, but if you're going to do it, go get tested first. Check your body's all in the clear before you even mess around with any type of growth hormone releasing peptide, because you've got to make sure that your body's in a natural state of play and it's nice and healthy to do what you want to do, because otherwise you are increasing the risk.
And you don't want to be doing that. Why should women care about peptides specifically? Because there does seem to be a little bit more interest from women. As we discussed, it's probably been quite popular with a lot of the gym bros, historically. But there seems to be more female-specific benefits that are surfacing now that peptides are slowly becoming more popular, despite the fact that they're not TGA approved, and we'll keep saying that the peptides in Australia in particular are not TGA approved. And we know that in America that they are going to be looking at approving some through the FDA soon, but I don't believe that that's quite happening.
Well, you've got to remember that insulin and the GLPs, they are TGA approved.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, insulin's been around forever, and that's saving.
Insulin's a peptide too, and that's a good point, right? It's a peptide as well, and so there are peptides that are approved. But when we're talking about peptides in today's context, we're talking about in the biohacking space and longevity space and how you can optimize your health. And that there's still a lot of, I suppose, the jury's still out from an Australian health management perspective.
100%. Well, I think the two biggest thing that I guess really tickle a woman's fancy is easy weight loss and skincare and looking good, your skin. I mean, I'm a 40-year-old man. I think I've moisturized 3 times in my life. So, it's I don't have a skin routine. And I think GHK, the copper peptide, that's just gained so much momentum because, I mean, it modulates up to 4,000 genes in the body, which are all anti-aging and improving skin elasticity and collagen. And the word peptide has been so prevalently used in skincare for so long. But if you look at 99% of the products that say peptide, there's nowhere near enough ingredient to have any sort of effect whatsoever. It's just a word and an ingredient to sell a pretty product. And that's why GHK, because it's at these doses and you're injecting it, it's actually going to work. But that's where the old copper uglies come in, which I'm sure, I don't know if your users, your listeners have heard about that. But GHK, it's like renovating a house. Say if you're redoing a kitchen and you rip off a bench top, it's going to look pretty bad, but you're about to replace it with your brand new bench top, right? With GHK, there's this renovation that goes on and your skin breaks out and all these things can start happening. But that's your body about to put the new bench top on and basically do all the remodeling. So you've got to stick it out. And sometimes people don't see any difference for 8 to 12 weeks. But it could also be. Yeah, and look, it could also be if you start getting the copper uglies. I hate that nickname, but it also could be a dosaging issue because a lot of people are dosing it now with this glow stack, which is a daily injection, whereas typically doctors who are prescribing GHK, it's every second day or every third day. So now they've chucked it in on a daily routine where previously it was prescribed not every day, every second day. So there's a lot of people overdoing it, and therefore it can actually have negative effects. So I think back to your original question of why have they become so popular with women? When the GLP-1s came out and they got approved, that was the biggest advertisement for peptides ever. And everyone all of a sudden knew what a peptide was, and it was assimilated with this miracle drug, which everyone was losing weight and in Hollywood. And then that was the catalyst for GHK becoming popular. And I think those two peptides alone have really just infiltrated the female market. Because when I started Biohackers, it was 90% men. And then when I left last year, it was probably 60-40 men.
That's really interesting. It's a quite interesting change in terms of the demographic. Look, I suppose it has become immensely popular because of the fact that with the GLP-1s, there has been significant anecdotal evidence by looking at how the celebrities are losing weight and other people who have found that they're losing weight. And sure, that's fine. And there's a place for that, particularly if somebody's suffering from obesity, if people are being prescribed a GLP-1 to help support that transition and try to get back to a healthier state. But I think with the GHKCU, that's an interesting one because I've recently started taking it. I haven't noticed a huge difference, but I'm only on it for a short time. Probably I've only been on it for 2-3 weeks, but I find that it It bites, I tell you. Not when you're injecting it, but afterwards it stings. And I've been trying to find the best place to actually inject it in my body, because tried it on my thigh, then I had to do it into my
doctor prescribed place.
Yes, it is.
Good.
And I've had to insert it into my stomach, but because that's where the sting doesn't last as long.
See, I'm the opposite. I have to go into my bum because I get just a big sting. I'm a big baby anywhere near my stomach. But
I take it every other day or every 3 days because I just hate the sting. It just lasts 24 hours.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, look, everyone reacts differently to it because you are injecting, a foreign protein or peptide into your body, and your body is naturally designed to fight off any foreign invader. And I'm sure we'll go into it later, but I've got a lot to say on the grey market peptides because I need people to understand the warnings and the implications of risking your life. It really is with some random person on WhatsApp. It's just insane that the world has. Imagine if like a random person from China with an Aussie name who spelt no English well started pitching you, a new $100 skincare. You'd be like, oh, go away. I go to my shops and I get my skincare that I've been using for 20 years, please. Piss off. Or whatever it is. But people now are going, okay, I'm going to inject this random substance from this person I have no idea from an Excel spreadsheet that looks like it was made by a 5-year-old, from a mystery manufacturer, which they won't even tell me the name, with absolutely no testing data whatsoever. And then I'm going to inject that substance and bypass every natural defense system that my body has and see what happens. Let's go. Like, it blows my mind that that's become normalized.
Well, I suppose it's being led, by the biohacking community as well, because we all are experimenting with our bodies. It's part of what biohackers do. But I think that a lot of people
be educated on where you're getting it from.
I was just about to say that. I completely agree with you. You have to be educated about it, and biohackers do educate themselves about what they're taking and where they're getting it, and try to get it from a good source as well, from a compound chemist or from a functional medical practitioner. And that's where, my husband and I get ours from. But I think that it's really interesting to see how, and let's go there. I was going to go there later, but let's talk about the grey market, because you've already highlighted that it's dangerous. And so what are some of the things that you've seen in the space of peptide, which you've been in for, as you said, over 10 years? What are some of those horrible, case study examples, the stories that you've seen where people have
First off, I want to validate people for going there. Like, I'm not saying, I understand, because anyone who can do basic maths, there's the understanding. $400 for a vial prescribed by a doctor or $40 from China. I mean, if you're just doing on a budget, I understand where people are going. And then obviously we can't talk about it from the medical perspective. It's heavily regulated versus every advertisement under the sun. So I understand why people are going there, but you've just got to understand that out of the 1,000 manufacturers, you don't know the difference whether it could be made in someone's backyard beaker or if it's in a full bio lab being fully tested. And unless you have COAs with all that testing, there's a lot of ways to pick them, and I'll go through them all so at least people can have. I never recommend going to the grey market or black market, but I'll at least give you a couple of tips to keep your health and safety first. So
before you do that, COAs, just explain what a COA is. What does that do? Thank you.
A certificate of analysis. So generally a certificate of analysis, they will have a purity report, and number one red flag is if a purity report says 99.9%, or if they're looking at 5 different peptides and they've all got the same rating, massive red flag, because every peptide is completely variable. So if you're looking at 2-3 different peptides, it'll be 95.2, 9, 98 point, whatever it may be. They're all going to be varying. So if there's a static number, it's fake. If it's a stamp signature, it's fake. What else? There's so many. So generally there's 2 options with a COA. A company will do a manufacturer COA, and that's basically like asking a kid to grade his own paper. They're going to pass. So you never want to go a manufacturer that gives you their own testing, because of course they're going to say it's perfect. So then they go through third-party testing facilities. Like Janashik is a really, really big company that does a lot of third-party testing. And if they're providing Janashik reports, then you look for endotoxin, sterility, mold, and all of these tests, because in a manufacturing facility, so any pharmaceutical that needs to go into the pharmaceutical market to be prescribed, it has to go through what's called an LAL test. Now that test is a sterility test, but an endotoxin, so lipopolysaccharides, what they're called, and in layman's terms, it's dead bacteria. And this dead bacteria is actually heat resistant. So even if they do a quick sterility test, unless they're a proper manufacturer, they actually can't do an endotoxin LAL test. And what endotoxins do is they build up slowly in your body. You could be injecting a peptide for 3 weeks, for 2 months, and have no effects. But what you're doing is you're slowly increasing your inflammatory cytokines. Your body is building up this massive endotoxic inflammation, and it'll go into endotoxic shock. And it's basically the same as sepsis. And you're putting your body into a massive infection. And as you know, sepsis kills 11 million people a year. So unless you know that it's safe, mold, another big one is, without the testing, then you could be injecting mold, and it's really easy to become contaminated or viral. It can be the process of manufacturing, the amount of time it takes to get to you in that lyophilized state. If it's been exposed to extreme temperatures, if it's been bashed around a lot, there's so many things that can make something not sterile. So my rule of thumb is if you ever reconstitute a peptide and it's cloudy, straight in the bin. If it's cloudy, it's contaminated. That's number one rule. Okay. If there's particles left in it floating around, it's contaminated. It's not mixing properly. Throw it in the bin. So the number one is if you're going down that route, give it a little swivel after constitution. If it's not crystal clear, straight in the bin it goes. Now, it's not going to test for everything, but that's the biggest red flag. And you'd be surprised how many people are just like, oh, I just thought that was normal. I just went through with it. You are injecting. I know, right? Yeah, I know.
What about with the GHKCU, because it's purple?
So
how can you tell if that's been?
Yeah, so it's basic, that really dark blue. You've got to just look, put through a light, hold it up to the light, and you can see if it's going to be transparent or opaque. You can see, even though it is that color, you still can see if it's clear or not. And again, that goes the same with the particles. So it's definitely a harder tell, but if you put it up against some sunlight first thing in the morning, which is the best, or a torch, and just briefly as well, because the two biggest enemies of a peptide are light and temperature. So they both kill peptides. They break down the actual amino chain.
And so if you have peptides and you've been prescribed them by a doctor, do you store them in the fridge?
Always store a peptide in the fridge. Once a lyophilized state is where a lot of these powders come from, make them more sterile. They can last, they say, up to 2 months, and it maintains the integrity. But after that, powdered should be in the freezer, and every time you reconstitute, in the fridge.
And let's just clarify for those that don't understand what reconstituting is. That's when you're mixing the powder with the backwater, right?
That's correct. And so in Australia, everything has to go through compounded pharmacies. So basically the compounded pharmacies will get their raw material from a distributor who generally gets it from China. There are some manufacturers out of India now, but all the API, the raw material, the design, it all comes from China. It was all around from China. It's where everyone buys it. And then it comes through, it's tested, it goes through a distributor, and then the raw material goes to a compounding pharmacy. That's where they compound it in a sterile lab, produce it for you, ice pack it, and send it out ready to go. So you're not playing chemist at home.
Yeah, great. So back to the grey market. So we've highlighted what we need to look out for. You've talked about the certificates, the LAL. You can practically look at whether there's cloudiness or whether there's any particles in the peptide that you may have received or purchased. What are the other risk factors in purchasing a peptide from the grey market in your mind?
I mean, if it's even a peptide, there's a massive, so there's what is the website? It's called FINRIC, FINNRICK.com for listeners. And it was basically a massive group of US doctors who did third-party testing on all the manufacturers in China. And it will give you a rating of poor, excellent, good of all the manufacturers. And there are so many that don't even have the active ingredient or 10% of the active ingredient. So that's another big one. You could just be buying really expensive water and just injecting water. That's a really big risk. So it's always just the biggest thing you do is just do as much due diligence as possible. Check those COAs, check the FINRIC website, check the manufacturer. And if someone's giving you any kind of price list or anything that doesn't have a company name, if it's got a Gmail account, if the company's email account is like gw767@gmail.com, what kind of company is going to have that as a business name? So it's just about making common sense, really. Just hide your excitement for a little bit and just go, would a business have this on their website? Would a business have their ABN attached to this? Think of it like a business transaction, like an invoice. It needs to be a proper transaction. And unless it has all those details, just don't go near it. But again, I would always be going through a doctor because there is a lot of testing that needs to be involved.
Do you think the reason people are purchasing from the grey market is the price point?
Absolutely. I think the two biggest factors are the price point, which is probably the biggest. And the second, it's the advertising, because it's in people's face all the time now. Unlike the medical space, again, you can't advertise anything. I couldn't even say the word peptide. Otherwise, I would be fined by the TGA a year ago. So not only could I not talk about a product, if I said the word peptide, that is me advertising my business and I will be fined for that. So that's how strict it is.
Yeah, which I get it, and we need to have that regulation to be able to protect people. But I suppose all the more reason why the TGA should be looking at trying to approve peptides so that people are not purchasing from the grey market, would you argue?
Yeah, exactly. I think because there's a clip on the ticket from every point, like from raw manufacturing, material distributor, compounding pharmacy, business, doctor, post, everything. There's probably about 10 different steps where everyone's taking a piece. And that's why a $40 vial goes to a $400 vial. So I completely understand the price point, and there needs to be something done because unfortunately the grey market has exploded for those reasons where it's so readily available. It's gotten out of control now because of the advertising. And the TGA, I mean, I don't have anything wrong with the TGA. I think they're doing a great job at mitigating the risk, but they're understaffed and overwhelmed now. And this is just becoming so out of control that it's like, you need to get on top of it. If you look at China, so they actually, like the way that their government system works, they have a rule. So I actually work with a guy called, well, not work with, but I consult for a guy called Conrad, and he's a Scottishman. And he is building the biggest and first manufacturing facility in China who's not Chinese. And so he's basically going through all these steps at the moment, actually documenting everything on his Instagram, which is, I think, just CONRAD, Conrad. It's an interesting read. He's a very interesting character. So what they did with steroids, there was a mass production of underground testosterone being made, right? Now, the rule they have in China secretly is, as long as you're sending it, exporting it to other countries, we don't have a problem. You dare give it to any of our people, we'll shut it down. So they saw manufacturing happening within China. Within 3 days, they banned the whole manufacturing of testosterone. And within 5 days, no one could get it from China. Like literally from decision, within 5 days, no such thing as testosterone. It's insane. Whereas with our government, the way it works, it's like, good luck catching us. Yeah. So, customs are just overwhelmed. I feel very sorry for them. It's a very hard job and they're underappreciated, they're overworked, and they've got a big job ahead of them. And I really hope we can find a benchmark which really lifts up the medically prescribed peptides because, it is a medication. You should be prescribed and you should be under doctor and patient care. And that's why I created in the first place. It was literally so people can make sure they're under the care of a doctor and then making sure they're doing it in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the black market as well. What's happening there with peptides?
Well, it's just exploding, isn't it? And I think there's so many people profiting off it that there's more and more dodgy manufacturers or people claiming to be manufacturers. And I think, a lot of the people that people are speaking to through WhatsApp, a lot of the Chinese mafia, they actually just buy cash from big manufacturing facilities and they just have their little logistics, their own companies, and they might slip in fake ones here and there, but you're not buying from the manufacturer. What manufacturing facility that's doing hundreds and hundreds of kilos of raw material going to all the biggest clinics around the world, they're not going to be on WhatsApp messaging Bob from Crocodile Dundee, whatever, who he is. They're not going to be hustling for a price and messaging you every 10 minutes saying, do you want to order, sir? Do you want to buy? Do you want to buy? Like, it's unheard of. So no one has that capacity to advertise, right?
Let's bring it back to how peptides can potentially support women in particular if they get it prescribed from a medical practitioner. Do women respond differently to peptides than what men do?
For sure, especially with anything that's hormonal. Like, you've got to think when it comes to all of these varied peptides, like your hormone system, they're not individual offices. Like, think of it like an open plan office space. One little thing can affect your hormone system in massive other areas. And a woman's hormones are way more complex than a man. As they say, men are simple creatures. Our testosterone runs off a 24-hour period. The sun, you guys, it's more like a lunar cycle where you've got that 28 days. So it's a wave, and you've got to predict exactly where that wave is to be able to, I guess, to understand the benefits of what's going to happen. And that's a lot harder to predict than a male's to like hormone levels. So from a hormone perspective, I think there's a lot more, I guess, study that needs to be done. And I would say any woman who's like breastfeeding or pregnant, just don't go near a peptide. There's just not nearly enough studies done. So just a blanket no. Anyone with previous history of cancer, I think at Biohackher we did, if you'd had cancer within 5 years, we would not prescribe you. But if you are healthy and you do meet the criteria, I think there are a lot of benefits for women. And we go back to, peri and post-menopause. I think this is when it matters the most for women because of that dramatic drop where basically your body is just turning down the volume on all your signalers and systems. And the peptides, they're going to help turn the volume back up. Your body knows how to do its job. It just needs a reminder, and it needs a gentle kick up the bum to get going again. And that's what the peptides do. So I think it's absolutely beneficial.
Okay, so let's walk through some of the peptides that are great for women. I put a call out to my community to see what questions they had, and a lot of them are wanting to understand whether there are any peptides that would support the symptoms from arthritis. So if you're suffering from arthritis, are there any peptides that you could take that would help reduce the symptoms, I suppose, mostly the pain and the swelling of
Yeah. Look,
joints?
arthritis is a tough one because it could be there's so many there's actually different types of arthritis. And I think, again, I don't mean to keep going back to it, but in that peri and postmenopausal state, that's with the drop off in cortisol also has a massive effect with joint stiffness, with joint pain, increase of arthritis. So I think from that perspective, BPC 157 is just its sole job is to reintroduce and your body help heal those tendons, cartilage, and then that can in turn help with nerve pain, with arthritis. So that was definitely prescribed for arthritis, depending on how the arthritis came about, how long it's been there for. But that was one of the main prescribed peptides for arthritis. And it's not a guarantee, but it's definitely one of the key ones. There are some new experimental peptides coming out that are more targeted towards arthritis, but I would not even like to mention them because unless they're studied enough to be prescribed, if they're still been done in a couple of mice and they're not even on anyone's list from a compounding pharmacy, I'm not even going to mention them because there's been no testing done. So,
Sure.
I wouldn't be comfortable saying them. But there's definitely peptides that are arising that are more target specific. But for arthritis, injury repair, BPC 157 is the golden one, which is mainly prescribed. And then thymosin beta 4 a close second. And if you're using them together, you've got a better chance because they complement each other really well.
Okay. And so, though, when you said using them together, you are injecting them separately, though, you're not mixing them together, like you mentioned earlier about stacks, like iStacks or the Wolverine stack, and that you wouldn't do that. So would you take these separately or?
Well, if a compounding pharmacy is combining them, I would absolutely trust it because they know what they're doing. So yes, you could take them together. If not, and you've taken other routes from a safety point of view, I would personally go individual and you do 2 separate injections at the same time. But when you're mixing any peptide, a lot of people don't know, but there's 2 problems with mixing a peptide yourself. Number one, if you're drawing a syringe from one peptide and then you're putting it into another vial and taking from another peptide, you're contaminating that second vial. So you're opening it up. You're literally contaminating a vial. So that's problem number one. And then problem number 2 is peptides are these fragile chains of amino acids. So you just stack them together in a syringe, it's going to start breaking down instantly. So if you put them in the same syringe, their effect is going to be drastically reduced.
Okay, good to know. Which peptides are best for preserving lean muscle? Because when we get to midlife for women in particular, sarcopenia is a real concern if you're not doing strength training. And I'm assuming that whatever you're about to recommend or you're not recommending or whatever the research is showing, that it has to be done in conjunction with those lifestyle choice implementations as well, like doing your strength training as well, right?
Yeah. So I would always say just look at sleep, nutrition, and resistance training as a number one. And then when it comes to peptides, look, with the growth hormone releasing peptides, they are heavily prescribed. The CJC and ipamorelin are prescribed by a lot of women's clinics. That's probably the biggest one. But if you're looking at growth hormone, increasing growth hormone, it reacts differently to a man with testosterone than a woman going through with estrogen, and it reacts differently to fat cells. There are so many different variables. It's really hard to say this is what to take. You know what I mean? Because there could be so many different avenues. For preserving lean muscle, the growth hormone releasing peptides, they're known to increase growth hormone. Growth hormone is known to help you maintain and produce more lean muscle. So if you follow the theoretical trail, yes, that is what people would recommend. But there's no guarantee.
Right. Okay. So, but with those growth
Hormone
hormones,
replacement themselves, just to interrupt, sorry, but hormone replacement themselves, they did a study in Australia, and I think 2% of women were on hormone replacement therapy and 50% were eligible. And when I say eligible, it would improve their daily life significantly if they were to do so. So I think hormone replacement therapy is another topic which I'm no expert on, but we had a lot of specialists that work for us at Biohackers, and they would tell us basically, hormone replacement therapy has been very male dominant with TRT because TRT is simple. Add testosterone, the levels are low. We fix everything. It fixes our libido, our thought process, everything, energy levels. With women, it's a whole different story, but there can actually be these really, really tiny, different, minute changes that a doctor could prescribe that could make the world of difference. And they're not as aggressive as you think they are. So it's definitely worth exploring. And if you can get your hands on a doctor that'll actually talk about it, they will be able to give you some absolute nuggets of information. But unfortunately, I am not able to do so. But it's definitely a path you should investigate for your followers.
Oh, look, and there's so much great research now that shows that HRT is so important for women, in particular their longevity and to avoid sarcopenia. And whenever we host our little longer retreats, we always get our ladies that come along to do a Dutch hormone test so that we can understand exactly where their hormone levels are, what their estrogen's doing, what their progesterone's doing, testosterone as well, and cortisol levels, because it's so important for you to understand what's happening with your hormones, and then hopefully they can take that blood work and go to their doctor and then get the support they need and get the prescription for HRT. But as you said, It is very nuanced. Everybody's different. Your estrogen level could be fine at one point during perimenopause and then plummet, once you get into menopause. So it's something that you should be constantly checking for on a regular basis. Just on those growth hormones, how do they compare? If somebody was just wanting to take a growth hormone secretagogue, how does it compare with simply doing resistance training or eating enough protein?
I mean, you asked the difference between chalk and potatoes. I mean, it's you can't compare the two, because resistance training is literally training your muscles to live longer, stronger, be better. So a peptide, it's just helping your body signal something. But if you're not training, if you're not exercising your body, it's breaking down. After the age of 28, we're on the decline. And then the older you get, the steeper it gets. If you look at muscle as an organ, they say that, at 40, you want to be able to deadlift 100 kilos to be able to lift a baby at 90. There's all these crazy correlations that Peter Attia does in his book, Outlive. And it's just the preservation of muscle is everything when it comes to longevity. And if you look at all these blue zones and these people living long lives, there's two main components. There's that mental stimulation. It's about social, because isolation is one of the leading causes of death, loneliness. But number two is all of these places, people just walked everywhere. And they live on hills on the side of mountains. And they get their legs pumping. And that's it. It's getting that body moving and keeping it moving, because once your body stops moving, it breaks down. So you've just got to keep it going. And it's really, really quick to descend. My dad was a professional tennis player his entire life. He's 91 years old now. And he had stopped moving 10 years ago. And, he needs to be assisted everywhere. And he's the angriest old bastard off the back of it, because he used to being so active, and all he wants to do is just, I'll walk in, he's like, oh, F you, you're able to walk. I can't mow the lawn anymore. And, but you can understand the frustration of someone who's been so active their whole life, having that taken away. Because I think everyone's goal now, it's not to live longer, but it's to live a better quality of life. Like
100%.
I don't want to live to 120 like a vegetable. Like, put me out of my misery the second I can't jump out of bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's one of the reasons I love living on the farm, because I'm pushing wheelbarrows around full of feed for the horses, or, mucking out stables, and I'm constantly, walking up and down the hill, bringing horses back and forth, and constantly moving my body. So yes, absolutely. You've got to use it or you will lose it. And you don't want to end up like your dad, being cranky and old and not being able to move. We've had a lot of interest from my community around the best peptides for skin and preventing aging in skin. We have touched on GHKCU. Can women realistically expect that peptides are going to work in terms of reversing skin aging, as opposed to expensive skincare? What's better in your mind? What are the myths and what actually does really work? What's the research show?
Yeah, GHKCU modulates up to 4,000 genes in the body. Like it's a powerhouse of a peptide when it comes to everything collagen, elasticity of the skin, collagen is the building block of everything your body's made of. right? There's different types of collagen, but essentially it's what builds your body, holds your body together. It's everything. So a collagen building peptide, it's got to be the biggest anti-aging peptide, surely. And the other one, which is not a peptide, which you've mentioned before, NMN, the precursor to NAD. NAD is the other biggest anti-aging, I guess, powerhouse I would look at as well, because everything comes down to your mitochondria, right? Which is your cells. And if your cells are dysregulated and not functioning properly, you need to address that. So there are a lot of peptides which help address mitochondria, and then it helps your body to produce ATP, which is your energy production. And you need to feed your body the right thing. So if you look at sleep, nutrition, exercise, these are all different aspects of targeting and making your mitochondria more efficient. So all of them are just trying to upregulate and optimize your mitochondria. So if you look at the mitochondria from a cellular level, you start there and you optimize your mitochondria, and you can do that from so many different ways. And NAD being the battery packs to your mitochondria, it's basically the energy that fuels your mitochondria to perform. So NMN being the precursor, it's the system which then goes and gets your body to produce NAD, which is the battery pack for your mitochondria, which then helps your body operate and produce energy. So it depends what stage you really want to look at. If you just want to look at skin, I'd say GHKCU, hands down. But if you want to look at the bigger picture and what's creating the breakdown of the skin and the elasticity, look at your mitochondria.
Okay. And so for mitochondria, is there a peptide for that?
Yeah. So, I mean, mitochondria, you've got MOTS-C is a very big one. It's like an exercise. It's basically exercise. So it mimics your body's ability to exercise. So they call it, the joke is they call it exercise in a bottle. Sounds great. And then you look at things like something that's going to help increase your body utilize the ATP. So there are other peptides that are combined, that you can combine MOTS-C with. Again, they're not approved for medical use in Australia, so I don't want to mention them. The ones that they will see on the grey market, which I'm not recommending taking because they're not, but are things like SS31, and there's a few others. Now, there's a really good actual supplement, which is not a peptide, called urolithin A. And that is a supplement, which promotes cellular autophagy. So basically, with your cells, you've got what's called a cell regeneration cycle. Your cells are always doing this big circle. And when they start to slow down, they become senescent. And that means they stop. When a cell becomes senescent, it opens itself up to risk of disease cells infiltrating that and becoming a zombie cell. So the whole goal with your cells are to keep your cells moving. And when they become senescent, get rid of them. And what urolithin A does, it gets rid of the crap and allows you to help the good ones grow. So if you compare it to probiotics for your gut, if you've got bad IBS and you've got really bad bacteria, and then you chuck a load of good bacteria on top of it, what happens? That good bacteria turns to bad bacteria. You're worse off than when you started. You've got to actually take a peribiotic or a prebiotic to get rid of the bad bacteria before you then put in the good bacteria. It's exactly the same with your body and its mitochondria and its cells. You've got to take out the crap to help the good ones grow. And the urolithin A is a really good supplement to look at that. So I would suggest having that in the cupboard.
Okay. What about cognition? People, as they're getting older, they might be concerned about the fact that, they're having what I call the brain pause. You forget where you put your keys, or you forget somebody's name when you haven't seen them for a while. Are there peptides coming through in the market at the moment that are showing promising research regarding improving cognition?
Yeah, I can speak from a personal perspective on this one. My mum's got dementia, and I've been personally just being her little lab rat, and I've significantly slowed it down to the point where I used to walk into the room and she'd be like, "What are you doing here? When did you arrive?" And I would get that 5-6 times every time I left the room. I have gotten to a point where I've really slowed that to the point down where she hasn't done that. She's not leaving the food in the oven and forgetting about it. We're still having the same conversation a lot. There's a lot of repetitiveness. The joke is she could probably buy her own surprise birthday gift, but there's a lot of peptides which are really helping. And there was a peptide developed for Alzheimer's called Biohackher, which is a very popular one that is prescribed in Australia, and that helps repair neurological pathways in the brain. So originally developed for Alzheimer's, it's not really treated because Alzheimer's is anything from mental health or cognitive perspective, no one wants to go near because there's too many risks. And doctors, they only want to attach their name to something that's guaranteed. So if something's not going to work, they're not going to put their name to it. So they won't prescribe it. But as biohackers, we want to try and test things. And I've tested dihexa, which has worked wonders. And I do that once a year for myself, and it does a really big brain reset. Then there's cerebrolysin, which was derived from pig brains. And that's actually that was used for stroke victims and people with severe brain damage after things like car crashes and stuff. And I've taken that personally as well. Now that had tremendous repairing of neurological pathways. So if you look at like your brain is this interesting, crazy organ where if you damage your brain, and you look at this with a lot of sports people and concussions, your brain will form a new pathway around. So it won't heal, but it'll create another path. So if there's a blockage, it goes around. But if you break that next pathway and it's got nowhere to go, you're stuffed. But these peptides have been shown to repair pathways. And, cerebrolysin, when I took that, the amount of anxiety that I had, I couldn't leave the house for a week because it re-repaired so many pathways. My brain was so overstimulated. I felt like I'd, drunk 1,000 coffees, and it was insane.
That's not good.
No, but I tell you what, after I got over that week, because it's a 10-day cycle, I felt $1 million. I was the type of person that could remember anyone's name, every phone number I'd read. It was crazy. I felt like I was, superhuman for a while there. And of course, you slowly go back and you need a reboot. The other two main ones, which are prevalent and prescribed and very easy to cross the blood-brain barrier, which can be done through nasal spray, are the ones that we mentioned before for the Russians. They're spy peptides, which is Celank, which really helps with anxiety. It's like, think of it like a Valium, but without the tiredness or drowsiness. It just helps settle and calm your mind and allows you to think clearly. And then there's Cmax, which is, it ups your concentration level. It helps your memory up to 60%. Now, these two peptides, the other two previously that I mentioned were more like reboots, whereas these two are daily usage where you can use 2 to 3 times a day, and they last like 3 or 4 hours. So it's almost like when you need it, you use it. Whereas the other ones are a regeneration tactic.
Okay, I didn't know that about CMAX. That was only one that you would use and as you needed it rather than something that it reboots. So that's
your body actually builds up quite a tolerance to it as well. So if you were to do that every day for a long time, you would build up a resistance to it. So what you need to know is with peptides, if you look at Cmax and Celank, for instance, they're bioidentical peptides, but Cmax and Celank, to make them viable, to actually last in the body long enough to do anything, they put a tiny little tail on them, which basically stabilizes the amino chain. So it's basically bioidentical plus this little tail, which stabilizes the peptide long enough to have an effect on you. Otherwise, it would be dead in a minute.
Are there peptides that you personally think people should absolutely avoid right now?
Again, it's personalized, tailored medicine. So everyone's different. I would just say anything that's not prescribable by a doctor, there's not enough testing done on it to justify taking it. Now I know we're on a biohacking podcast here, and I myself experiment with almost every peptide that there is. So I have personally had great benefits from peptides that are not on that list, but I'm certainly not going to say it publicly, and I'm not going to recommend it. So from a don't touch perspective, anything that's just not studied enough that you're not comfortable taking, the only advice I can give is just make sure that you're getting it from a credible, the only source. That's the biggest thing I can say. Just don't risk your health and well-being, because if something is filled with any kind of mold or endotoxin or sterility issues, it's going to do the exact opposite thing that you bought the peptide for. It's going to increase your inflammatory markers. It's going to age you. It's going to make you sick and unhealthy and tired. And all the things that you're not buying the peptide for, you're doing the exact opposite. So just make sure that you're getting it from a good source, a trusted source. If you're going to go grey market, listen to the things that I told you to look out for, because, I understand why people are doing it. Again, I don't recommend it, but just think smart about it and just do your due diligence. And again, avoid the really non-tested ones. If there's not a decent rat study on it, don't touch it.
Don't stay away from them. Talk to me about Retta, because that's something that that's a particular peptide I've been hearing a lot about lately. It seems to be becoming increasingly popular.
Yep.
Why is it becoming popular? What does it target? And is the hype worth it?
Personally, I've tried it, and I think it is a game changer, because if you look at Ozempic, that basically allows your body to eat less. Retatrutide allows your body to eat less and burn more. So it's got different pathways. So you've got the single antagonist, which is Ozempic, semaglutide. Then you've got the double, which is tirzepatide, which also looks at regulating glucogen levels. And then you've got 3 antagonists, the triple antagonist, which is retatrutide, works on 3 different pathways. That also helps metabolize and burn fat as a fuel. So not only is it stopping your body from, I guess, eating less, it's allowing your body to eat less by keeping yourself full, but it's using those fat reserves to metabolize and utilize into energy. So unlike, you're not starving yourself, but your body's actually burning fat as opposed to just eating away itself with muscle and bone. Now, I think Eli Lilly have just put a 10 or 20-year patent on it. So no doubt it will be hard to get very, very soon, as happens with all big pharma. I love you, big pharma. I just don't want to say anything negative.
I did hear that though. Yeah, I did hear that actually 2 days ago. I heard that's what they're planning on doing.
Yeah. So look, I think
already.
Retta is a lot better than Ozempic. It's actually, they've just done a study on it, which it really, really, they did a massive test on. I'm not going to quote the clinical study because I don't have it in front of me and I don't want to get the numbers wrong, but it had a really, really, really positive effect on cancer patients at reducing cancer, active cancer from growing, and actually preventing cancer from occurring. So it's got a lot of these crazy properties, and it's also organ protective. It stops inflammation from cortisol spikes due to glucogen and blood sugar increases and things like that. So it's got a lot of really positive studies, and they are coming out. So do your own research. If I had them in front of me, I'd quote them, but I'm not going to quote them wrong on a podcast. But there is a lot of actual. There's actual studies behind it to back it. It's not just, what did the mouse do?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I might get you the sent with the study if you can find it, and I can include it in the show notes as a link.
Yep,
if people are considering, so we've discussed that it's really important that people avoid getting peptides as a grey marker. They should try to ensure that they get their peptides from a practitioner that can prescribe it to them. What blood tests or health markers should someone monitor if they're considering taking peptides so that they can ensure that they're actually seeing the benefits as well?
Your IGF levels, which is your growth hormone, your insulin growth factor. Look at your cortisol, look at your glycogen levels. Obviously, check your estrogen levels and your testosterone levels. Look at your inflammatory markers to make sure that they're okay. So check cortisol. They're probably the key ones. And then obviously your blood biomarkers, you make your white blood cells and red blood cell counts to check there's no anomalies there. And then if you want to step it up, check your cholesterol, your kidney function, your liver function. That would be the main ones to test. And without plugging my new business too much, but I've moved into more reactive healthcare. So I'm actually looking at a one-stop shop, created a company called MediHealthcare, and we're launching in a couple of months. Now we are optimizing and educating people that are stuck in the sick system, because we've done studies and, there's people that go into hospitals. My business partner managed emergency care facilities throughout New South Wales and hospital emergency wards. So many people don't even know why they're in there, what medication they're taking, what the medication does. And, it's crazy to think that our system, people just go in and they'll see a doctor who's never looked at any patient notes or any GP records they've ever been to. They're relying on the patient to go, oh, I had a tablet in a red box. It started with an S. There's no communication whatsoever. So, we need to get these old legacy systems talking with government regulated bodies, and we need to get all this information together to make sure that if you're going to see a doctor, they've got the accurate patient history. They can look at previous blood biomarkers. So going back to bloods, every different pathology lab has a different green zone. They've all got different ones. So you may be normal on one pathology lab, but out of range on another. Now, you've also got to remember that average rating, that is the average from your 10-year-old to your 9-year-old, from your super sick person to your super healthy person. So just because you're in green, that doesn't mean it's good for you. That's not optimal for you. So, if your GP just goes, bloods are all in range, don't take that thumbs up as a green is go, because that might be okay for an 80-year-old. But if you're a 30-year-old in the prime of a life, there could be some serious stuff going on that you need to optimize there. So with your bloods, I would look at it and look, in the beauty of AI, there's blood GPT now. There's an AI just to do your bloods. So you can really get those, ask for your results, never take your doctor's thumbs up, take them out yourself and do your own research, because you'll be surprised about how much you can get from your bloods. Like your detailed blood work, there are blood analysis specialists now that can look at all the environmental factors. They can give you a whole nutrition exercise plan just off your blood work, because they can see every tiny thing that's missing, every supplement, which has caused different anomalies, and they can optimize it. Optimizing your blood work to an optimal range is the best way to actually read data and to action that data. It's not about biohacking, it's about testing yourself with something. Do you feel better? Great. If you don't, stop doing it. bloods are measurable data that you can look at. And even if you look at, your Whoops, your Apple Watch, your Oura rings, I did a test last month and I wore my Oura ring, my Whoop, my Hume band, and I wore 4: Oura ring, Apple Watch, Whoop, and Hume band. And they all had, I looked ridiculous, but they all had different ratings. I all had different heart rate variability, different resting heart rates, different recovery ratings. They were all, and so varied. And I was
Isn't that interesting? And you would think it's the same body, right? And you would think that it would be the same, that the results would be the same.
The Hume band is actually the most accurate, and it's the least known of them all. So I think it looks more about your body's actual biometrics rather than algorithms, because a lot of them are based off algorithms and averages. And again, that's what we're trying to get away from as biohackers, right? It's about testing your individual body and your biomarkers and finding out what your body's doing and optimizing your body from a tailored approach, because no one's body and biology are the same.
No. And some of those wearables were created based on male biology as well, and not necessarily considering female biology. And that's my other beef there about some of those apps wearables. 100%. But hopefully that'll change soon. So what questions should somebody ask a practitioner before starting peptides?
They should tell them exactly what they're feeling, what their goals are, and just give them as much information as possible. And then just ask how to reach your goal in the best possible way, but ask for a holistic approach as well as a medical approach. Just go, okay, if you're prescribing this peptide, is it going to work if I'm sleep deprived? Tell them about your day, because I think a lot of practitioners, they'll ask you a question like, have you had cancer? Do you have a history of heart disease? But they don't ask how many hours of sleep do you get a night? Do you have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old that are driving you batshit crazy and preventing you from sleeping and your cortisol level spiking? Are you in a high stress job that you're working 18 hours a day? These are huge contributing factors to your health that need to be considered, and they all need to be looked at along with any medical advice. So I guess with your doctor, try and look at it from a holistic point of view. And if your doctor doesn't have the capability, give them as much information as you can prior, or come armed with a document. Do some research yourself on your own biology and give them that information, because information is everything. And I think, especially with your standard GP, they don't ask too many questions. They don't ask nearly enough to be able to prescribe you some of the things that they do.
I know, right? They just don't.
Or an antibiotic just by walking in the door. And those are it changes just grenades into your system. It's insane.
Yeah, no. Look, if you're not getting that sort of support that you need from your doctor, I think just change your doctor. Find somebody that is a little bit more holistic in their approach. All right, I want to wrap up with some rapid fire questions on some of the more commonly used peptides. And I just want you to answer whether it's worth it or whether it's hype.
Sure.
Let's see how we go. All right, BPC 157.
Absolutely worth the hype. I've had... Yeah, sorry, go. I'll just go.
No, go on.
BPC, I had IBS for about 5 years, 10 years ago, just from rubbish eating. And, before I hit my journey, I reset my whole gut microbiome. I've got the healthiest gut ever. I used to be so I could even sniff wheat and I would be, sitting in the bathroom. Whereas now I'm bulletproof. I could drink a glass of barley tap water and I'd be fine, I feel like. And BPC, I attribute everything to that. It bulletproofed my guts. So absolutely a win for that one.
TB500 or TB4?
Yep, I think it's very, very good, especially for wound healing and acute post-surgery, especially if you've had a cesarean or something like that, or any active surgery where you've been cut open. It's very, very good for wound healing, and it's a very big anti-inflammatory as well. So yes.
GHKCU.
Yep, I think that's probably the gold standard of peptides from a anti-aging perspective.
CJC 1295?
Yep, I think it's got its place. I think it works well. I don't think everyone needs it, but I think it's got its spot.
MOTS-C?
MOTS-C, I've only ever had once from a personal experience, and I had a reaction to it. So like CJC, you can have a histamine response. MOTS-C and CJC are the two that you can have a histamine response. I personally had a response to it and it didn't work for me, but I've heard a lot of really good things and I've got a lot of friends that swear by it. So again, up to the individual.
AOD 9604?
No.
Sorry. GLP-1s for longevity?
Longevity is a big one. If you're obese and struggling with cravings and you've got a lot of issues, I'd take it. If you're looking to manage something and get on top of it, GLP-1, I would think there's not enough data to take it for longevity yet.
NAD peptides.
NAD, absolutely. I love NAD. I'll have a vial in the fridge every day of the week.
Oral peptides versus injectables.
Oral peptides, I mean, if you look at a peptide, it's an amino acid. Your gut is designed to break down amino acids. So oral peptides just don't work. If you just look at the science, your gut breaks it down. Then it's got to go through 3 other breakdown periods. That's why they're injectable. If you look at any other amino acid, they're broken down in the stomach. Why would a peptide be any different?
And what about peptides for skin?
Peptides for skin, I think peptide is used way too loosely in the skincare products. Transdermal, so obviously putting it through the skin, you need like a 10 times more dosage than you would an injectable to even get results. And therefore, what peptide, how much clinical dosage? I reckon 90% of skincare peptides are rubbish. They're not going to get the clinical outcome that you want.
Okay,
big claim.
Awesome. No, big claim, but
they've got a lot of other big things, vitamin C, hyaluronic acid. There's a lot of great stuff in skincare. I'm just saying peptides and skincare, no. I think it's a waste. Avoid the hype.
Are there any peptides that we haven't discussed today that we should be having a quick chat about before we wrap up?
No, look, I don't think so. I think people should look more into the cognitive peptides. I think because, they say your gut is your second brain. Let's look after your brain, which is your first brain. And I think your brain is so often forgotten. And it's only when you start forgetting and you get to that, that senile age where you're like, oh shit, I should keep this going. It's a lot harder to bring it back. The whole aim of biohacking, reversing is hard. Preventing and slowing things down is a lot easier. So I would just focus, your brain is everything. You don't want to be active and not know who your friends are and family are and not remember the beautiful life that you've lived when you get older. So that was my only recommendation. I'd focus just as much on your brain as your body and make sure that it's an equal playing field because they're both equally important.
Awesome. Hey, Ted, it has been absolutely amazing to have a chat to you today. Like, you're a wealth of information when it comes to peptides, and thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge. It's been really cool.
No worries. What I also can do is we are launching the SEVYN Club, which is the SEVYN.club, which is our new website, which is just an education platform. And we've just developed a course, which is a $500 course called The 7 Pillars of Aging. And it addresses all the 7 pillars of aging and helps with the 7 pillars of health. And what I was going to do is for your listeners, anyone who registers, just give it to them for free.
Awesome.
And then more than so you can put a code or let me know and I'll organize that and you can put it in the show notes. So anyone who registers, we'll make it free for them.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, we will organize that offline and we'll pop that link in the show notes for everybody. Again, thanks so much, Ted, for educating us all about peptides and joining us on the show today.
Absolutely love talking to you. Thanks, Azra.
Well, that's a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn more about biohacking, go ahead and sign up on my website at www.biohack-her.com to get a free copy of my 5 top biohacks to get you kick-started. While you're there, you can also check out my blog page for more tips on biohacking. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. Let us know if there's anyone you'd like us to talk to in particular, and we'll endeavour to get them on the podcast. Until next time, remember to live well longer.